For this example, we're going to be looking at adding and subtracting decimals. The first thing I'm going to do before I get into actually adding and subtracting the decimals though is make an estimate to see what my answer should be around. So I'm just going to do a quick round here. I'm not going to round up. I'm just going to keep it as a -4, whatever the integer part is. So I have a -4 plus 3. And now for addition, again, we have to follow our addition rules. When we have different signs, we subtract. So I'm going to subtract the absolute values of 4 and 3 to give me 1. And because 4 had the greater absolute value, my answer here is a -1. So our answer should be somewhere around this -1. So now that we have that set up, we're going to go over here and work with the actual problem of a -4 and 52/100 plus 3 and 26/100. Because the signs are different, we are going to end up subtracting here. So I'm going to set it up with a bigger number on top, and I'm going to write it as 4 and 52/100 minus 3 and 26/100. It's important to make sure that your decimal points are lined up when you are subtracting with decimals or adding with decimals. So it's important to make sure that these are lined up here. We would just subtract as we normally would now. So I'm going to borrow from the 5, make that a 4. This 2 becomes a 12. 12 minus 6 is 6. 4 minus 2 is 2. Carry down our decimal, and 4 minus 3 is 1. So we were left with 1 and 26/100. But again, because the 4 and 52/100 has a greater absolute value and that was negative, our answer here would be a -1 and 26/100. Another method that we could use for adding or subtracting, we could split the decimal numbers up. And what I mean by that is I'll rewrite it again as -4 and 52/100 plus 3 and 26/100. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the -4 and the 3 and work that out separately. So I have -4 plus 3, and that gives me a -1. So we use that up, so I'm going to get rid of that. And now I'm going to focus on this 52/100, which was negative, because this whole number was negative. So now I have a -52/100 plus 26/100. And again, because the signs are different, we're actually going to subtract here. So if we set this up, it's 52 minus 26/100. And when we subtract this, we end up with 26/100 again. And because the negative had the greater absolute value, that is a negative. So this equaled a -26/100. And now all we have to do to get our answer is combine these two. We have a -1 and a -26/100. When they get combined, we end up with an answer of, again, -1 and 20. Our next example is a subtraction problem, and we had 7 and 4/10 minus 5 and 18/100. That's actually a -7 and 4/10. Our rule for subtraction is to rewrite this as adding the opposite. So this becomes a -7 and 4/10 plus a -5 and 18/100. Now I'm going to make a little estimate here. So this is -7 plus -5. Signs are the same, so I could just add them up. Signs are the same, so I'll add them up, and that gives me a -12. So I should have somewhere around a -12 as my answer. Now to figure out the actual answer, I'm again going to split this up. I'll split it up first and then I'll show it with them set up vertically. If I were to split this up, we had a -7 plus a -5, and that gave us a -12. And then we're left with a -4/10. And I'm going to change that -4/10 to 40ths because this number here went to 2 decimal places. I want to make this one to 2 decimal places. So I'm just going to add a 0 in. So that's a -40 hundredths plus a -18 hundredths. And when we add up the 40 and the 18, that gives us a -58 hundredths. Because they're both negative, we can combine them. And when we add 12 with 58 hundredths, that gives us a -12 and 58 hundredths. If we were to set it up vertically and add it, we would just add these absolute values because they were both negatives. And we could set that up as 7 and 40 hundredths over 5 and 18 hundredths. You'll notice again that the decimal places are lined up. When we add, that's 8. 4 and 1 is a 5. 7 and 5 is 12. So that gave us again our -12 and 58 hundredths.